Children of poly relationships, what was it like growing up? When I was younger I didn't realize mom and dad were poly, but now it's funny to see my friends' faces when I say my mom and her wife and my dad's girlfriend and his other girlfriend and I are gonna get together for dinner tonight. You must have a massive dinner table. I had a therapist in a poly relationship and they all three had a child together that was around 9 when I met them. 2 dads and 1 mom. Unfortunately, they couldn't be fully open about the fact that the 3 of them were in love since before she was born because the one she called dad worked for a religious college and that information getting out at all could have cost him his career. So she only called 2 of them mom and dad while she thought of the other like an uncle that visited every day. She seemed normal. She liked to make slime. I'm really glad you liked the therapist and had fun making slime, but I am super duper confused about why you knew any of this. This will probably be buried but it happened to my husband who didn't even realize it was happening. When he was a kid his father lived with his mothers, one of whom he thought was his birth mother and the other was an identical twin to her that he just called his aunt. He said it felt pretty normal. He never knew it was poly until much later in his life. Several years back, his mother had passed away and his aunt contacted him again asking if she could move in with him to have him help her as her caregiver. He agreed, and just before her passing he received a letter from her lawyer, written by the twins and his father, finally explaining everything. Turned out his aunt was his actual birth mother who had kids with his father too before he was born but who had passed away in a house fire. The mother that raised him was completely sterile and in fact had a hysterectomy at a very young age. He was in complete shock, but said it made sense how close everyone was in the house, despite keeping all the adult stuff behind closed doors. His big shock seemed more the fact that his father kept up 2 relationships instead of just 1, and he was either scared, impressed, or both. I grew up in a small town and 1/2 of the town were hippies. In the 3rd grade one of my friends couldn't go on a field trip because he returned a permission slip with the word parent or legal guardian crossed out and signed by the group representative. Of course in the 3rd grade we didn't know what was going on until my mom explained it to me. But when the kid was told he couldn't go the whole hippie commune came over to class explaining to the teacher how all their kids will be raised by the group and it's damaging if they see a single person as their parent or guardian. FFS. Just sign the dang form and let the kid go on a frickin' field trip. My parents have been a triad since 1998. It was hard, I won't lie. They dated a lot of 4ths who brought their own children into the mix then later break up with them. It was really difficult to constantly have parental figures and siblings come and go. The most being 13 kids and 4 adults in a 2-bedroom apartment. I am glad though that I grew up with it. I'm poly myself and it was never something my parents encouraged or forced on us. In fact they always say not to try it unless you're a specific type of person. It introduced me to a wider range of people and broadened my mind to what family actually is, which is the people who love you and make you feel safe, that is chosen family. When I was young my folks dated a couple of couples. One was very long term. We were military families but they managed to finagle a transfer together. So wow, that would have been like 8 years at least. They kept in close romantic contact when they separated, but IDK if they qualify that as still being together. They were my aunt and uncle, essentially. We and their kiddos got sent off to grandparents, theirs and ours, together to give them alone time. It was kinda a given that we'd all see each other every couple days. Either they'd come to our house or we'd go to theirs. Not for them to sneak away for sexy time, but just to spend time together and be a family together. I knew I could go to them about anything, I could talk to my folks about, and even some things I couldn't. That closeness continued even when my own folks split. IDK what standing they had with them after that though. Unfortunately, my aunt kinda had a psychotic menopause and we had to go NC with her. Nobody knows that I'm still in contact with uncle though. IDK how my mom would feel about it. But he stayed a rock for me when my own dad didn't. Same drama as any other family I guess. Just more players on the stage. Hey, a question relevant to me honestly, though, it wasn't super different than any other way of growing up I assume. I just have one extra dad than everybody else. That's just always how it's been, and I never really thought about how abnormal it was until high school. Even then it was more just thinking whether I really cared enough to explain to other people, or just go with a white lie on paperwork or whatever. Biggest difference I can think of while growing up is that there was always someone home, which can be frustrating for a rebellious teenager. Hey, it's a post for me. Honestly, I think it's way more boring than most people would think. Most of the time, my mom wouldn't introduce a partner to me unless it was a long-term relationship, so most of the time I got the single mom experience. I think the most exciting thing was going out for dinner to meet someone new, and occasionally my mom would date someone who had a kid my age, and we would awkwardly play together while our parents were on a date, as in, we were playing in my room upstairs and a movie date or SMTHN was going on in the living room downstairs. Really, for the most part it was so completely average other than knowing my mom had 2 girlfriends and eventually I also got a stepdad. The worst part was around 8th grade when kids found out and started bullying me for it, asking all kinds of disgusting sexual questions about my parents. No one wants to think about their parents having sex. Eventually I learned to just not tell anyone unless we were close and I knew they were cool. I only ever had one person I trusted enough to actually come to a family picnic where my mom's partners would all be there. My mom's partners aren't my parents, but they are part of my life and my family. They're wonderful and supportive, and have helped me through some horrible dark spots in my life. I'm grateful to have such a wonderful, loving family. So yeah, not very exciting, I know, but it's my life. I'm curious about whether you think your experience with poly parents has made you more likely to seek out a non-traditional family structure. It was fine. The poly part didn't really become known to me till I was 13 or so. The only weird bit was if I was bringing home a friend or someone I wanted to go out with, I had to kind of explain what to expect beforehand and some people got weirded out. I'm an adult in a monogamous marriage now. I saw firsthand that getting 3 people to come to a consensus on anything was exponentially more difficult than just getting 2 on the same page. Polymath. Difficulty of solving a problem in n amount of time grows exponentially by x amount of partners, such that problem complexity follows p equals xn. I am 15 years old, and my parents often have potlucks where they invite their partners over. My parents are good people, and everyone they invite over are good people and have become my friends. I also usually will meet their children and become friends with them. It really is just a wonderful environment, but it is very difficult to maintain. More partners equals more drama, and a lot of times 2 people will get in a fight and cause the whole group to split for a while. But all in all, it's pretty great. Hey, it's not often you get to talk about it while you're experiencing it. Most of these are people who experienced it years ago and have a new perspective now. Thank you for your comment. Can't really say it felt weird or odd as it was just what I was used to, but I think I can honestly say it's made me a more open and loving person. I'm not afraid of being close to people because my parents were always very close with their friends. For reasons that are obvious now but less so at the time. I also grew up getting to know my parents' friends quite well because my parents were very close with them and trusted them enough to look after us. Although I'll admit this was probably more so they could have the house free of children. It does mean that I'm still quite close with a lot of them and consider them friends of mine outside of my parents' friendship with them, and I also have a few more parental figures to choose from, meaning I can pick the best ones from each to try and emulate. All in all, I'd say I'm a more well-rounded person as I got to know a lot more people as family growing up, as well as exposing me to many different personalities. My mother was involved in a poly relationship for a while when I was a kid. It was very confusing. For a while there were 4 of us kids around. Me, the kid of the other woman, and the 2 kids of the man. We were all pretty confused and resentful. Our favorite joke was pick a number and wait in line. My friend described it as like going through the stress of your parents divorcing and meeting your mom's new boyfriend, but forever. He cut off his relationship with his parents, and refuses to even call the dude who isn't bio-related a family member. He hardly talks about it, but that's the explanation I got out of him. I don't know why this comment isn't higher up. This is what everyone I know who has poly parents would describe it as. My parents were swingers. They went to bondage clubs and things like that. I found out in my late teens, so I didn't really care all that much. I learned of it through my friend who told me his mom told him that my parents asked if they were interested one night when they were chilling in the hot tub. Started to put the pieces together after that. All the Halloween costumes in that box that I always overlooked. It's weird, but whatever, more power to them. Don't think they do it anymore though. They are getting a little too old for that life. I have some shocking news for you that once you were out of the house they probably got crazier. My parents weren't poly until I was a toddler, I guess. I thought of the other couple as just nice people my mom and dad were close with. They met online and came to visit. They all clicked well, and eventually the other couple moved in with my family. I didn't make the connection they were all together until I was a teenager. I suppose I thought they were all just roommates of sort, though bed swapping and sharing was occurring the whole time. By that point, my mom and dad had divorced and so had the couple. My dad married the other woman, and my mother married the other man. My mother has divorced and remarried again, and my father and stepmother are still together, almost 20 years later. TLDR. In retrospect, it's just kind of an odd situation, but I honestly didn't even realize my parents were poly growing up, and now my dad is married to the lady instead of my mom. My parents were poly since well before they got married and I was born. Mostly it was just boyfriends or girlfriends that would visit. I didn't know anything about sex. They didn't tell me anything inappropriate, although they did make sure that I wouldn't gab about who slept in what bed when I was young. They were dead scared of child services getting involved. One of my mom's boyfriends became a lot more serious and he moved in when I was about 8 or 9. It was a lot like having an uncle move in. He became part of the family, drove me and my brother to places, got involved in our interests. I told people he was my uncle. He had another girlfriend aside from my mother, too, openly. He broke up with my mother in a big way, which they kept private from me, and moved out when I was maybe 14 or so. It might have been hard for my mother, but it wasn't traumatic for me. We kept in touch for a few years until he moved farther away for a new job. It wasn't like a divorce experience, more like my uncle moving out. My dad had a serious girlfriend too, but she was also married with a kid my age, so she never moved in with us, but we went and visited as a family a few times a year. She's great friends with my mom to this day. Her kid and I were good friends for a while and drifted apart as we got older, a lot like cousins. Also, I had my aunt who had no sexual or familial relationship with either of my parents. She was just so close a friend that she was practically family and she'd take me for a lot of weekends and summers. I thought she was legit my mother's sister until I was 8. Also, there were other friends that would move in while they got back on their feet, and I have no idea if sexual or romantic relationships were involved. We treated them like family guests. So basically we were a normal nuclear family with normal kinds of family relationships that just weren't conditioned by blood ties. I know 7+ families with poly parents and more with open relationships. The kids are kids. Some are great. Some are anxious or manic. It varies by parent and child, not by the poly. The poly parents that aren't great parents are pretty comparable to the normative parents that aren't great, and the poly parents that are great are pretty comparable to the normative parents that are great. The biggest differences I can think of are going to be about communication, affection, and love. But even that's just a tendency and not a definitive distinction. That's my experience anyways. My son is a member of a throuple with 2 women. The first is his college GF who always had an open relationship. During a long distance period of their relationship he started very casually seeing girlfriend too, but over time it got more serious and now they all live together. Things are happy and wonderful for them, but I really do worry about how the dynamic would change were someone to fall pregnant. I worry about jealousies and inequalities rising up, but mostly I worry for my future grandbabies. The societal pressures and teasing from outside the home, as well as possible resentments and issues within the home. I can see how, if things work the way they are planned, it could be a wonderfully supportive and rewarding way to grow up, but you know what they say about the plans of mice and men. So I actually really appreciate the insight of this thread. I want to be supportive of my beloved throuple, but part of being supportive is discussing possible pitfalls in hopes of avoiding them, and this has already highlighted some. It's also pointed out some of the positives, so thank you. Had a friend several years ago that grew up with poly parents in Kansas. What he described seemed like a pretty healthy family upbringing, and I would describe him as a well-adjusted, happy human. I don't think either parent was particularly promiscuous, but throughout the years they would have other partners. He was a proponent of polyamory and had a pretty good way of explaining it. Basically, no one person can satisfy your everything. So polyamorists have more than one partner that allow them to experience romantic partnership on a fuller level of their being. Polyamory isn't my cup of tea, but it is possible to have healthy relationships with this lifestyle, including that of a family. Honestly, I don't know that it would be for me either, but that is defo one of the most helpful ways to put it for the sake of understanding. It makes me understand the point and appeal. Oh boy, a question I can answer. I really hope it doesn't get too buried. It was weird, kinda. My parents had a strange poly relationship that didn't totally start being poly until I was around 9 or 10. My stepdad started coming over more and more, and it's weird for some people I don't call him stepdad or dad. I just call him by his name. My dad was not quite as good with people as my mom was, and so his partners honestly kinda came and went, but stepdad stuck around. Things were alright. Having 3 parents meant they could buy a house together, and so they did. Things for them were rocky at times, but I feel like I turned out okay for the most part. Biggest issue was some cheating on someone's part. Yes, you can still cheat in a poly relationship. When I became an adult, my mom and dad shared some partners as I was finding my footing and moving in out every few years. I'll admit the people my dad brought in were not as nice as my stepdad and also didn't seem interested in being in my life. Now I have 3 parents, in a way, though it definitely made me not want to even try out poly relationships. Polygamy is very common on my dad's side. My grandpa has 30+ wives. My dad has about 4 last time I heard. Anyway, it was awful. Hated that part of my childhood, and my mom escaped and left with me when I was a child. Sometimes I see him. It's just super awkward around him and my half siblings. My grandpa has 30+ wives. I barely know 30 people. My parents were poly, but it started out of cheating and getting back at one another. I suppose they were always open but not poly. Basically, the woman who was my dad's girlfriend for many years tried to get him and my mom to divorce so she could be my mom and my dad's wife. Years passed of me being shuffled around and ignored so they could pursue their love lives. Eventually my dad cast the woman out of his life. My parents divorced, and now I don't have a relationship with either of my parents because they're crappy. That was part of it. Yes, I feel like this question was just for me. I come from a Mormon fundamentalist family. I have 3 mothers that I have grown up with. I have 19 blood-related siblings and 26 total siblings. My mother divorced from the religion when I was 5. I am 17 now. Since my mother gained custody of me and my 3 other full-blooded sisters, we have been going down every weekend to visit my family. My mother divorced because she came to the realization that the lifestyle she was living was very suppressive to women and had lots of potential for every kind of abuse in the book. And it happened all the time, you just couldn't tell. It is actually very much like a cult. Hey, this is one that I can finally answer. I come from what would seemingly look like a nuclear family. Mom, dad, sister, me. My parents, however, would go out on weekends to swingers clubs or house parties. I didn't know this as a child. I would say I learned this when I was 13ish, and it was in discussion around jealousy and my response to jealousy in a high school relationship that I was in. I distinctly remember my dad saying to me, "Jealousy is an emotional response to you missing something. You need to work on finding out what is making you jealous," followed by discussion about how him and mom have never been closed and that they were happy to seek other partners as they saw fit. There were many discussions around dating culture that I remember. I remember a few of the people that they were friends with would come over to our house. They were great people. I considered them like I would any other friend of my parents. I ended up expanding into poly relationships early in high school. My triad went to the homecoming dance together, for example. My triad went to the homecoming dance together, for example. Just imagine 3 Asian gangsters entering the ballroom with flying doves. Frick, I made this question a few weeks ago and got no answers except a guy denying the existence of poly relationships. Got what I wanted in the end, in a roundabout way. I know a few young adults who grew up in poly households. From what I recall of them as children, teenagers, there was a fair bit of neglect, because often their parents would put their date nights and partner time ahead of the needs of the children. There was also some resentment among the childless partners of people who dated poly folks with children, since there was often an expectation that the childless partner would provide free child care, because children are a community responsibility, when another partner wanted to go on a date with someone else. Unicorns, the hot bee-babes sought out by hetero couples exploring polyamory, were particularly vulnerable to this. Not a child of one, but my dad had a poly relationship with his wife and a girlfriend. My dad and his wife were in their mid-40s. Girlfriend was 28 and looked like a prepubescent teen. I'm all for people having whatever kind of relationships they want, but it was super weird, and obviously headed towards drama. I once went on vacation to Hawaii with them. Just me, my dad, and his wife and girlfriend. Girlfriend stole pills from stepmom and blamed it on me. Eventually, my dad ended up getting divorced. Stayed with girlfriend a while. Girlfriend is anorexic. Ex-wife comes back. They ship her to a rehab for her anorexia. Then get remarried. Wife forbids dad from any contact with ex-girlfriend and has cameras installed all over the house to make sure dad isn't cheating. Because apparently he did that, but, you know, she cheated on him when he was deployed in Afghanistan, so I don't feel bad for her. If you couldn't guess, dad got divorced again eventually. Different girlfriend. No poly. I'm angry just writing this lol. Children raising children. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.